We have been in contact with each other a lot just lately, emailing each other, bitching everybody else.
Picture this. You're sitting in a cozy room with one of rock's greatest legends, Rod Stewart, now 80 years old, and looking back at his incredible 6-decade career. His famous raspy voice fills the air as he starts sharing stories you've never heard before. Stories about the artists who got under his skin, the rivalries that shaped music history, and the feuds that had fans picking sides for generations. Rod Stewart has never been one to hold back his opinions. Throughout his legendary career, the man with the spiky hair and unmistakable voice has been refreshingly honest about his feelings toward fellow musicians. And let me tell you, some of these stories will absolutely blow your mind. You know, there's something magical about listening to a music legend reflect on their life. Rod Stewart isn't just any musician. He's sold over 120 million records worldwide and has been making music longer than most of us have been alive. When someone with that kind of experience starts talking about the industry and the people in it, you better believe it's going to be fascinating. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let me take you on a journey through Rod Stewart's most memorable musical conflicts, the artists who frustrated him the most, and surprising reasons behind some of music's most talked about rivalries. Let's start with one of the most unexpected feuds in rock history, Rod Stewart versus John Lennon. Yes, you heard that right. One of the Beatles and Rod Stewart actually had a pretty serious disagreement, and it all started with a song that hit very close to home for both of them. Back in the 1970s, Rod Stewart released a deeply personal song called The Killing of Georgie. It was a heartbreaking ballad about a gay friend who was murdered, and it was actually one of the first mainstream rock songs to deal with homosexuality in a compassionate way. Rod poured his heart into this song, and it meant everything to him. But then John Lennon heard it and wasn't happy. Not happy at all. Lennon thought the song sounded too similar to a Beatles track, and he let Rod know about it in no uncertain terms. The two exchanged some pretty harsh words, and for a while there, it looked like this feud might get really ugly. What made this whole situation even more intense was that both Rod and John were incredibly passionate about their music. Neither one was willing to back down, and both felt like their artistic integrity was being questioned. Rod was hurt because he genuinely cared about the message in his song, while John felt like his musical legacy was being borrowed without permission. The feud eventually cooled down, but it showed just how seriously these artists took their craft. Rod later admitted that the whole thing taught him to be more careful about musical similarities, but he never regretted writing The Killing of Georgie because it came from a real place in his heart. Now, if you think that feud was surprising, wait until you hear about Rod Stewart's complicated relationship with his own bandmates in the Faces. This is where things get really interesting, because Rod wasn't just dealing with outside artists. He was having conflicts with the people he worked with every single day. The Faces were supposed to be a tight-knit group of musicians who supported each other through thick and thin. But as Rod's solo career started taking off, tensions began to rise within the band. His bandmates felt like Rod was getting too big for his boots, and Rod felt like they weren't supporting his ambitions. The breaking point came when Rod released a particular song that the rest of the band absolutely hated. They felt it was too commercial, too far from their rock roots, and frankly, too much about Rod Stewart and not enough about the Faces as a group. The arguments got so heated that Rod later admitted this one song basically destroyed the band's unity. Rod has always been honest about this period in his life. He said that looking back, he could understand why his bandmates were frustrated. But at the same time, he was an artist who wanted to grow and explore different musical directions. The conflict between staying loyal to your band and following your artistic vision is something many musicians struggle with, but few talk about as openly as Rod has. What's really fascinating is how Rod handled criticism from other artists about his musical choices. When he released Do You Think I'm Sexy in the late 1970s, the rock community went absolutely crazy. Fellow musicians accused him of selling out, of abandoning his rock roots for disco money, and of betraying everything he had stood for as an artist. Rod was genuinely hurt by these attacks. He had always prided himself on being authentic and true to his musical instincts. But here were artists he respected telling him that he had lost his way. Some of the criticism came from musicians he had looked up to, and that made it even more painful. But Rod didn't back down. He defended his right to experiment with different musical styles, and he pointed out that many of his critics were being hypocritical. After all, weren't they all influenced by different genres throughout their careers? Why was it okay for them to evolve, but not for Rod Stewart? This controversy revealed something important about Rod's character. He might have been hurt by the criticism, but he wasn't going to let other people dictate his artistic choices. He believed in following his instincts, even when it meant facing backlash from fellow musicians. Speaking of artistic integrity, Rod Stewart has never been shy about calling out what he sees as fake or contrived behavior in the music industry. In recent interviews, he's been particularly critical of modern artists who he believes manufacture drama for publicity. Rod has said that when he was coming up in the business, if something wild happened, it was usually genuine. If a hotel room got trashed, it was because the band was actually having a crazy night, not because their publicists thought it would make good headlines. He's expressed frustration with artists who seem to create feuds and controversies just to get attention. This criticism has put him at odds with some contemporary musicians who feel like he's being judgmental about their methods. But Rod sees it differently. He believes that authentic artistry comes from real experiences and genuine emotions, not from calculated moves designed to generate buzz. The interesting thing is that Rod's criticism isn't just about young artists. He's also been critical of some of his contemporaries who he feels have compromised their artistic vision for commercial success. He's never mentioned specific names in these criticisms, but industry insiders know exactly who he's talking about. One of the most surprising aspects of Rod Stewart's career has been his ability to maintain friendships despite professional disagreements. Take his relationship with Elton John, for example. These two have had what can only be described as a love-hate relationship that has lasted for over 50 years. On one hand, Rod and Elton are genuinely fond of each other. They've supported each other through personal struggles, celebrated each other's successes, and maintained a friendship that has endured for decades. But on the other hand, they've also had some pretty spectacular arguments over the years. The source of tension between Rod and Elton often comes down to their different approaches to fame and success. Elton has always been more flamboyant, more willing to embrace the theatrical side of being a rock star. Rod, while certainly no stranger to showmanship, has always prided himself on being more down-to-earth and authentic. This difference in style has led to some memorable exchanges between the two. They've made jokes at each other's expense, criticized each other's musical choices, and occasionally had genuine disagreements about the direction of their careers. But somehow, their friendship has survived all of this drama. What's really remarkable is that both Rod and Elton seem to thrive on this kind of competitive relationship. It pushes both of them to be better artists, and it gives them someone who truly understands the pressures and challenges of being a rock star for over 5 decades. Rod's honesty about his relationships with other artists extends to his views on the music industry as a whole. He's been particularly critical of how the business has changed over the years, and he's not afraid to name specific trends and practices that he finds troubling. For instance, Rod has expressed frustration with how quickly artists are expected to produce new material in today's market. He believed that great songs need time to develop, and he's critical of artists who rush their creative process just to meet industry demands. He's also been vocal about his concerns regarding streaming services and how they've changed the way musicians make money. Rod has pointed out that many younger artists struggle to make a living from their music because of how little streaming pays compared to traditional album sales. These criticisms have sometimes put Rod at odds with industry executives and even some fellow musicians who have embraced these changes. But Rod believes that someone with his experience and success has a responsibility to speak up about issues that affect all musicians. What makes Rod's criticism particularly powerful is that they come from someone who has successfully navigated the music industry for over 60 years. He's seen trends come and go. He's adapted to multiple changes in how music is made and distributed, and he's maintained his relevance across different generations of fans. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of Rod Stewart's relationships with other artists is how they've evolved over time. Many of the feuds and disagreements that seemed so important decades ago now feel almost quaint in retrospect. Rod has admitted that some of his past conflicts were driven more by ego and competition than by genuine artistic differences. The music industry can be incredibly competitive, and when you're dealing with creative people who are passionate about their work, conflicts are almost inevitable. What's changed for Rod as he's gotten older is his perspective on these relationships. He's more likely now to focus on what he learned from these experiences rather than on who was right or wrong. He's also more willing to admit when he made mistakes or let his emotions get the better of his judgment. This mature perspective has actually helped Rod repair some relationships that were damaged by past conflicts. He's reached out to former bandmates, made peace with critics, and found common ground with artists he once disagreed with. The evolution of Rod's relationships with other artists also reflects changes in the music industry itself. The business is so different now from what it was in the 1960s and 1970s that many of the old competitive dynamics simply don't apply anymore. Today, Rod seems more interested in celebrating the legacy of rock music than in relitigating old disputes. He's become something of an elder statesman in the industry, and younger musicians often seek out his advice and approval. This doesn't mean that Rod has lost his edge or stopped having opinions about other artists. He's still perfectly willing to call out behavior or music that he finds inauthentic or disappointing. But he does so now from a place of experience and wisdom rather than from ego or competitiveness. One thing that has remained consistent throughout Rod's career is his commitment to authenticity. Whether he was feuding with John Lennon, arguing with his bandmates, or defending his artistic choices, Rod has always tried to stay true to his own vision and values. This commitment to authenticity has sometimes put him at odds with other artists, but it's also earned him tremendous respect within the industry. Even musicians who have disagreed with Rod's choices or criticized his behavior generally acknowledge that he's always been genuine in his approach to music. Rod's authenticity is also evident in how he talks about his relationships with other artists. He doesn't try to sugarcoat past conflicts or pretend that everything was always harmonious. He's willing to admit when he was wrong, but he's also clear about when he believes he was justified in his actions or opinions. This honesty has made Rod's reflections on his career particularly valuable for music fans and industry observers. He provides insights into the creative process and the business side of music that few other artists are willing to share so openly. As Rod Stewart celebrates his 80th birthday and looks back on his incredible career, his relationships with other artists provide a fascinating window into the world of rock and roll. These stories of feuds, friendships, and professional disagreements show us that even the biggest stars are human beings with complex emotions and relationships. The artists who frustrated Rod Stewart over the years weren't necessarily bad people or inferior musicians. In most cases, they were simply creative individuals with different visions, different approaches to success, and different ideas about what it means to be authentic in the music industry. What's most impressive about Rod is how he's been able to maintain his artistic integrity while adapting to an ever-changing industry. He's worked with countless musicians, navigated numerous professional relationships, and somehow managed to keep making music that connects with audiences across multiple generations. The feuds and disagreements that once seemed so important now feel like footnotes to a much larger story, the story of one of rock's greatest voices and most enduring performers. Rod Stewart's honesty about his relationships with other artists doesn't diminish his legacy. If anything, it makes his achievements even more remarkable. After all, creating great music while dealing with all the personality conflicts, business pressures, and creative disagreements that come a long career in the music industry is no small feat. Rod Stewart hasn't just survived in this business for over 60 years. He's thrived, and he's done it while staying true to himself. As we wrap up this journey through Rod Stewart's most memorable musical relationships, it's clear that his story is far from over. At 80, he's still performing, still recording, and still sharing his honest opinions about the music industry and the artists in it. Whether you agree with all of Rod's opinions or not, you have to admire his willingness to speak his mind and stay authentic to his own vision. In an industry that often rewards informity and calculated moves, Rod Stewart has always been refreshingly genuine. His conflict with other artists, his feuds and friendships, and his evolving perspectives on the music industry all contribute to one of the most fascinating careers in rock history. Rod Stewart hasn't just been a great singer. He's been a genuine character who has never been afraid to be himself, even when it meant making enemies or facing criticism. And that, perhaps more than any specific feud or disagreement, is what makes Rod Stewart's story so compelling. He's shown us that it's possible to have a long, successful career while maintaining your authenticity and speaking your truth, even when others don't want to hear it. So there you have it, the real story behind Rod Stewart's relationships with his fellow artists. It's a story of passion, conflict, growth, and ultimately, respect for the power of authentic artistic expression. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Rod Stewart's musical relationships and want to hear more stories about rock's greatest legends, make sure to hit that like button right now. Your support helps us bring you more fascinating content about the artists who shaped music history. And don't forget to share this video with your friends, especially if they're music lovers who enjoy hearing the real stories behind the headlines. Most importantly, subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest videos about music history, artist stories, and the fascinating world of rock and roll. We got so many more incredible stories to share with you, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.